It's captive audience once again with Sonny Danforth and Don Anderson on Wonderful Wednesday. What say you, Sonny?
Hey, we are on the last Wednesday of November.
Wow, can you believe it? December is right. I mean, December is like what, Friday or something?
It is. It is. Did you have a
Wow,
good Thanksgiving?
it was awesome. My ever expanding waistline is expanding. I tried my best, but hey, what can I do, right? Thanksgiving here at my house, the children, the grandchildren, the great grandmother. It doesn't get any better than that, right? So
Right.
one, two, three is that four generations under one roof. How many people get to say that, right? So
That's
it's
right.
really, really a blessing for your grandchildren to get to meet your own mom. That's pretty cool. I mean, I got to meet my great grandmother until I was about 8 years old, and I've never forgotten it. So, yeah, I think it's awesome. How about you, Sonny?
Yes, I had a really nice Thanksgiving. Went to some family, my niece and nephews, and so we had, well, let's see, four generations under one roof. And you know what? I got to know my great grandparents
Mhm,
and grandmother and grandfather quite
mhm.
well, and I cherish those memories absolutely.
There's something special about being around old people and people who get denied that when they're kids. I mean, I really think they're missing something. I think to myself, to my kids, I knew somebody who lived in the 1880s. I mean, get your arm around that, right? Get your head
Right.
around that, and then to have them describe what life was like then. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. And the things with it when they've lived a long life, how
mhm.
much they have witnessed in their entire life, how
Oh,
much progress and change
mhm.
to scientifically, I mean, medically, so much.
Yeah.
I often wonder, well, wonder what all I might see in my own lifetime, you know?
Sure, sure. Yeah, the rate of change we're seeing. I remember us playing in my grandmother's basement, and they would have all the old implements, and they were from Mississippi. So the kerosene lamp, the hand pedal old iron sewing machine, the
I have one of
washboard.
those.
Do you? Yeah.
I
See,
do.
yeah.
A
Oh, yeah.
treadle
Well,
machine.
well, my mother, oh, I could still choke her. All of the stuff was in the basement, and
Uh-huh.
she had some construction work done. And of course, these guys asked her, she let them take it. I was like, "Are you out of your mind?"
You had no idea some family wanted those pieces.
Oh yeah, it's such an heirloom. However, I still have the mahogany black and white TV where you open the screen. Remember those old things, right?
Uh-huh.
So I have the TV where we sat and watched the news when they announced that when man walked on the moon, when when Robert Kennedy was assassinated, Martin Luther King was assassinated, the funeral of Eisenhower. I mean, all that stuff, right? So I can show my kids, hey, here it is. This is what it looked like, right?
Right. Right.
Great stuff. Well, we better get into the news because you and I
Well,
can go
hey,
on
we
and on,
better.
right? Yeah.
We hope everybody else had a good Thanksgiving too.
Yeah, and I hope you all have great memories as well. I see Bobby's got some information on here about her great grandma came up to the East
Yeah.
Coast in a covered wagon. Love those stories. You got to pass them on to the younger generation because
Yep.
otherwise they certainly won't get it from the public school.
Boy, that's for sure. They might have even eliminated that part of history by now. I don't know, Don. It's
Well,
crazy
what
to
a
see it
great
going.
segue that is. So, the first news item I'll lead out with, and maybe some of you heard about this, but this is a school district in Evanston, Illinois, and they've been offering classes very quietly because they don't want people to know, not the people outside of their little world to know about it. They're calling them affinity programs. Now, affinity programs is just a nice euphemism. And you notice how leftists always have euphemisms for real words. So that way they can avoid saying what it really is. Basically, what those programs are, to use the old word from the 60s, is called segregation. So they think they can actually enhance student performance if we had black kids only be taught by black teachers, white kids only be taught by white teachers. They didn't go beyond that. So you have to wonder if we get down to islanders and which islander, or if it's Asian, well, what? Because Asia is a continent, right? So would it be Japanese teachers teaching Japanese kids, or Chinese kids teaching, or Manchurians teaching? This could go on and on, right? But you could see the insanity of this. So people fought and died and had dogs and water hoses sicked on them in the 60s. So these clowns go back to the very thing that those people fought to get around. It's absolutely insane. Let me stop. I've bloviated enough. Sonny, your comments.
No, I'll tell you what, everything you're saying is right because frankly, I can't believe that this is going on in a school district. I would say initially, I say this is like illegal. This is segregation.
Mhm,
And we have championed that in this country to all be together.
mhm.
And as you were pointing out, where does it stop with the different nationalities that we have in so many schools? So where does it stop, with the islanders or Japanese or Chinese or whatnot? Or do they just lump those all together? I mean, right?
Yeah,
I don't
you know,
know.
leftists, they can't see people as individuals. You have to be some caricature. That's just how they see the world. You can't be a human being. You can't be Sonny Danforth. I can't be Don Anderson. I got to be a caricature of a black man, and you have to be a caricature of a white woman, and so on and so forth. That's how they see the world. It's never about content and character. It's about affiliation with group. That's how leftists think.
I would
And
think I would think that this school would get sued for doing this. Now, is this a mandatory thing?
So no, yeah, so they made it a voluntary thing. This is how they get around the Brown versus the Board of Education case from back in the 50s that decided all of this, is they're saying it's a voluntary. But here's my counter to that. If you're using tax dollars for anything like that, it should be against the law. So I think it's only going to be a matter of time before somebody makes that point and
Yeah.
sues them. If you want to do that on your own dime, feel free. But if you're going to use taxpayer money, then you should not be allowed to use it in this way. And oh, by the way, typical of socialists, they use different euphemisms all the time. So it may not be called an affinity program in your area. In
Right.
Minneapolis, let's see, they're called black spaces, right? So that's what they're called, which makes you wonder, well, what about
They're doing
Chinese?
this in Minneapolis as well?
Yes, which probably means they're doing it all over the country. But as
Oh,
usual, they fly under the radar, right? Nobody's reporting this from any of the national big media, so to speak. So be on the lookout for it. It'll be called something else, but there you have it.
wow. I had no idea on that. I really that blows my mind. That's taking us back. And as Bobby says, yes, the Dems are trying to totally divide us. They want everybody in a different box. And this is another way of doing that and perpetuating the snowflake mode,
Well,
right? I've
what you
got to
must
have my safe space.
Oh yeah, and what you must never forget: this is the party of George Wallace, the party of Jim Crow, the party of the Ku Klux Klan. This is the party that had the governor that stood on the steps of the schoolhouse, right, refusing to let black students go there. People never repeat this and let Democrats get a free pass on this. This is the party of slavery. They went to war to keep slavery. So this shouldn't surprise any of us. They're just doing what they historically have done and will continue to do in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's that's I just can't believe that. But more, I'm glad this is coming out. Because I mean, where did you see this story from?
So
Do
I
you remember?
think where did I see that one? It was I didn't let's see.
Well, anyway, it's getting talked about. It's getting
Right.
brought to the surface, and so when that happens, and like
Mhm,
we're talking about it,
mhm,
more others are probably as well,
mhm,
and that's how we
mhm.
get pushed back on these
Well, of
things, is
course,
by
yeah, you're not
bringing
going
it
to.
to the forefront.
Yeah, you're never going to see it in the national media. So big media is not going to be reporting this stuff. Pretty much everything I've seen has come from like some small conservative press outfit, right? But that's the only way you're going to get the news because the big media is not going to report it because they don't want you to know. That's how the Marxists roll. Um,
Right. And Bobby, we don't know how they're getting away with it because it's a voluntary thing.
mhm,
It's not mandatory, which means that actually takes up more space, Don, more
mhm.
teachers and more space,
Sure, sure,
more
absolutely.
classroom space.
Yeah, and the other reason they get away with it, to answer Bobby's question, is because roaches come out at night. When you shed the light on them, then they run, and that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to shed the light on the roaches, right?
All
So,
right, there you go.
so how about our next? The topic was the electric vehicles topic. I thought that was an interesting we discussed prior to our getting online here. And this is an article I saw. This is actually Associated Press. So this is like one of the shocking thing about this is that it was Associated Press. So this is a big media outfit that actually reported this. And they're saying that more and more data is rolling in that electrical vehicles are super unreliable. In fact, they have nearly 80% more problems than traditional combustion engine automobiles do. Besides being a lot more expensive, a lot more problems. So for those people who are wealthy enough to afford these things, and they can afford to buy something so that they can look good and uh, and fit their narrative, maybe it's not a big deal. But the average mom and pop trying to get through life, pay the bills, take care of the kids, they can't afford to have a car that's breaking down every 10 minutes, a car that you can't recharge the thing, right? Because you got to have an electric place to do it. They just can't afford that. So there you have it.
No, no, they can't. And actually, so I posted an article, the same headline, but from the Epic Times. And in reading this, there's actually there's electric vehicles that are having that nearly 80% more problems than gasoline powered cars. But then the plug-in hybrids have 146% more problems than gas vehicles.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that's a
Hmm.
lot of problems that have not been worked out. And I think which leads us to the next article is that they want to there was nearly 4,000 auto dealers signed a letter urging President Trump to tap the brakes on the electric vehicle mandate. So this
Hmm.
is dealers nationwide. They that are involved say that many customers are not ready to switch to electric vehicles. But also in this story, it talks about when you have a national emergency, let's say you need to evacuate because of an emergency, a train derailment or a hurricane or fire.
Like
Oh, wait,
Hawaii?
my
How about
electric
Hawaii?
car's got to charge up. Sorry, I can't leave yet, you know?
but, but don't worry about charging up. They've destroyed the electrical grid with all of its requirements to do windmills and all this sort of thing. So there won't be any electricity anyway.
Right. And then no, it's the high winds, and now there's no power. It's all cut because the electric company cut all the power, so you can't charge that car up. Oh my word!
Uh,
It's I
it's
was
it's endless.
well, it is, and I was really glad to see this story. That this is the one I posted about the auto dealers was from the Road and Track,
Mhm.
actually, and they're saying, you know what, we need to wait until the infrastructure's there, wait
Mhm.
until the customers actually want this. We
Mhm.
have a lot of kinks to work out.
Mhm.
And admittedly, I think it was Ford,
Mhm.
the fellow who was overseeing the electric vehicles for Ford, said he decided after hearing a bunch of complaints,
Mhm.
he took a Ford truck and went on a road trip, and he came back and he goes, oh no, these don't work. No,
You know,
these don't work. And this is it. Let's be truthful about it and say we're not there yet. So this is apparently in 3 weeks, nearly 4,000 dealerships all in all 50 states,
Mhm.
representing most of the brands, sent this letter to Biden. And they're going, we need to have better batteries
Mhm.
available to consumers. There's just things to work out with this. And quite frankly, I've always said gasoline engines I don't think are going anywhere. There can be other alternatives. What about hydrogen fuel,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And you can. I remember I knew somebody that used to run their car on fry oil, and
Mhm.
their exhaust
Sure.
smelled like French fries. There are other alternatives. What a way to recycle the fry oil from the fast food stores,
Mhm.
the fast food restaurants around your town, which is
Mhm.
exactly what this gal did. Went around and got their fry oil, and I don't know the mechanics of any of that,
Mhm.
but
Sure. Well, the
you
thing
know,
is, yeah, it's ideologically driven. It's not about solving a problem. The whole thing is just to get you out of your car because they don't like the internal combustion motor and they don't like oil being drilled out of the ground. That's really what this is about at the end of the day. It has nothing to do with the environment. They don't care about that. You look at the
Right.
progress that was made in California. I moved to California in the 80s and the smog would choke you to death. You couldn't even see the San Gabriels back in those days, right? And you were there, you know what it was like.
Yes.
And now look at how clean it is, and it's probably what 50% more people, more cars. The cars are so much more efficient than they were then. Let the market figure this out on its own. You go back to the time when Henry Ford came along and they first invented the manufacture of cars large scale. It was horses running around then. Nobody came down with mandates to make you get in a car. People transitioned to cars over time at their own pace. And remember back then, nobody remembers this, but horse manure in major cities was a huge pollution issue. The government didn't come along and, hey, this pollution is killing us in the cities, which it literally was, by the way. But the market people saw this was a better way to do things. The transition was gradual. The prices of cars used to be really expensive, and the cars used to fall apart all the time.
Mhm.
And the prices came down. The kinks got worked out, but nobody came along with a mandate. What is it about mandates, by the way, that the left just loves so much? What's the difference between a mandate and slavery? I mean, slave masters mandated that you work for them 24/7. That's I don't know why these people love mandates.
I don't know either, but to your point of we as a nation have done so much for emissions of vehicles, so much in our nation that other nations are not doing it. But now it's out there, it's getting so strict that it's killing us economically,
Mhm.
and it's stifling actual more growth, but it is killing us economically. And so this is a segue into an article that I had up by chance, Don, that I'm going to post right now. And it is DEQ here in Oregon. The Department of Environmental Quality eyes a 43% fee hike, and they seek public input. So this is a little bit of a red flag to everybody here in Oregon that they want to do this fee hike. And so this year, lawmakers approved allowing DEQ to raise certain fees by 43%. So now
43.
they want public input. A full 40% of the DEQ fee increase, Title V base emission fees, would hit about 100 businesses in Oregon, including one hospital, OHSU.
Well,
And
yeah.
and so they're showing what today in this article. I'll tell you what, it's from Oregon Catalyst, and there's a great a picture there, a meme really, that shows Columbia Steel. Today, you can't even see the emissions. Tomorrow, that same plant will be in China, let's say, and you'll see all the emissions, and the air quality is so bad. And that's really to your point, because we've done so much. You can see the San Gabriel Mountains now,
Yeah.
and the smog, we don't have those problems. And I like the advancements that we've done, but we don't need to continue down, in my opinion, down that road to where it now kills businesses, which is what's doing to fired plants, electrical plants. We talk about energy a lot on our program,
Mhm.
and this is just another one of it. In fact, when they shut down the Boardman coal plant,
Mhm.
the reason they decided to close was because of the fees from DEQ.
Mhm.
It cost more to revamp their uh, emissions system, which
Mhm.
it was compliant, and they had already been making it was all compliant and everything, and it was not a large polluter like people think because of the
Mhm.
scrubbers in the systems, but it cost more than what they were going to get, because all energy
Mhm.
companies have investors, and the investors said pull the plug.
Well, see, this is clearly it's a war on the working class. That's what it is. It's a war on the middle class. I mean, who else is going to suffer from this? If you're in the upper classes, you're not feeling this stuff. you're grifting off your government jobs and your university jobs and your degrees where you work and don't do anything, and get overpaid. It's the working class people that suffer from this stuff. It's their jobs that are going out the window. It's them that are going to pay outrageous amounts for gas. It's them that are going to have to buy these junk cars that they're trying to push on you, these electric vehicles that are outrageously overpriced, and then the things fall apart and don't work. It's strategic and on purpose, is all I can say. Nothing else makes sense.
Yeah.
They're trying to destroy the American economy, and it's amazing how resilient it is to have not been. It truly is. When you look at the out and out attack that we've suffered over the last, really the last 20 years, but especially the last 4 or 5 years, or 3 years anyway.
Well, they eliminated a huge part of the middle class just in the last 3 years, a huge part. And so you go, well, that's only 100 businesses. Wait a minute, this is manufacturing more
Mhm,
than likely. And so poof, there it goes.
mhm. Yeah.
And pay 43%. Who the heck gets, why should it be 43%? Where do they come up with that magic number?
In a time of inflation, by the way, and this is a great segue. Speaking of inflation, so at a time when everybody's suffering from inflation, this was article. Many of you may have not heard about this. I'm not on TikTok and all of this stuff, but I saw this in a report. I can't remember which article it was in, but someone published a TikTok article and they posted it. That meal at McDonald's, they had video of this and all this. The drive-through window, it was a quarter pounder with cheese, a large fry, and a Sprite, and it cost $16. And they were posting this to show how outrageous inflation was, in spite of what the government's telling us. So I thought that itself wasn't remarkable. Anybody who's gone out to eat knows that the prices of everything, especially eating out of, is just outrageous, right? I mean, I know, well, personal experience. I went to like one of these fast food places, and I try not to go there very often, and it was like 12 or 13 bucks. Like, it was just like way more than it was 3 years ago. But the Washington Post responds by saying in their article that the media basically needs to put the kibosh to this, to all of these people running around, false news, if you will, and making an exaggeration of how bad inflation is. You got to think to yourself, here's a prestigious, or used to be one of the one or two most prestigious newspapers in the country, chasing around some guy on TikTok who's posted something. That goes to show you how panicked they are that the regular citizens will really find out how much inflation really is. So you can lie all you want with your data. We all feel that. We don't need you to know what prices are. Everybody knows that it ain't 5% inflation we've been experiencing for the last 3 years. And I'll stop there.
No, it's not. In fact, they're trying to say it's only 8%. And actually,
Mhm,
like I was watching a business channel this morning and Fox Business, actually,
mhm,
and listening to Charles Payne. And he said, across the board, it's like 18% is where we're at. Some stuff is higher, some is lower. And it's like,
mhm.
yeah, because things are up so much.
Yeah.
They truly are. Now, In-N-Out meal for 7.45, that's a bargain.
Yeah.
Because for like $7 a small a burrito supreme, a
Mhm,
chicken burrito supreme at Del Taco. That's it.
mhm.
Just
Yeah.
the little burrito
Yeah.
for like seven and change.
And the other thing that you'll notice too is this is a classic trick that they'll do is they'll reduce the quantity of what you're getting. So yeah, the price might be the same, but that quarter pounder is a quarter pounder before cooking, for example. By the time
Right.
you get it, it's an eighth pounder. With
Yeah,
that,
and what are you? Never mind. I won't even go there. Yeah, right. There we go.
and that large fry, what used to be a large fry is like what that's a small fry, right? So that's the
Right.
other thing that starts to happen, right? Or the size of the drink gets to be gigantic because it
Oh
costs
yeah,
them nothing.
shrinkflation.
Yep, you'll fill you up on soda, so you won't notice that your burger's shrunk. Remember, some of you are old enough to listen to remember that famous ad from I can't remember which presidential campaign. I remember the gal was, "Where's the beef?" And this is
Right, right.
you might remember that. One of the
Yes,
best
I
political
do.
ads, one of the best political ads in history, by the way. but,
That
but to your
was very
but to your
good.
point, 8%, and they're trying to say 8% like that's good. 8%'s horrendous. I mean, if it was 8%, if it was only 8%, once upon a time, you didn't get elected for 8%. I mean, inflation should be no more than 2 or 3%. Um,
No, it
that goes to
shouldn't.
show you, yeah, that's how pathetic these guys are.
And Don, to segue from that, there in Oregon in January 1st, we're getting a 5% gas tax. If
Well,
everybody doesn't know, it's a 5% gas tax come January 1st. And I'm reading this article, which I just am posting right now. That is from the Oregon Catalyst. So apparently, in Oregon's gas tax went up in 2018, 2020, 22, and now 2024. And they, because a House Bill 2017, which was enacted 7 years ago, so that allowed increases.
mhm.
And but what are they getting for these increases? Oh no, they want to toll the highways. But the 7 tax increases, which is gas tax, car tax, bike tax, truck tax, auto fee number 1, auto fee number 2, and a payroll tax, since 2017 have raised $5 billion over 10 years for transportation. And
Well,
yet they're going, oh no, we got to toll the roads too.
they will never have enough. And the reason is because the objective is not to make your life easier. The objective is to trap you in your 15-minute city, to make it so unaffordable to drive that you'll essentially be forced to cycling or walking. And if you're over 65 and in a wheelchair or you're handicapped, I guess it's tough noogies for you, because that's what these people are about at the end of the day. Nothing else explains this kind of behavior. Nothing else does. I mean,
No, it
how
doesn't.
can,
And I wish I knew what the total on the gas tax was, but this article does not say.
well, I
But it
trust you,
says
it's a lot.
we are getting an additional
Yeah.
5%.
Well, maybe they look north of the border because, Washington State, they threw a 50-cent tax on it over here. Um,
Well,
it's,
that's how come over here, because I'm real close to Washington. I see
yeah,
nothing but Washington plates at our
uh-huh.
gas stations.
Well, there's your reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And even with our 5%, that's still going
mhm,
to be cheaper than Washington.
right, right, yeah. So you got two crazy states bordering each other. Actually, three when you got California.
3.
What can you say?
Yeah. Right. That's lucky people over here on the West Coast, the Mest
Luck of the
Coast.
draw. If only Idaho was right here.
Oh gosh, I'll tell you, it's kind of like if you buy whatever size house that you live in or apartment, you will fill it up.
Mhm.
And so however many taxes you can get from the people, you will budget for that and
Sure.
spend it, and
Mhm.
spend it frivolously, I might
Mhm.
add. Look at what
Oh, yeah.
they've I won't go down all those rabbit trails, but
Mhm.
we talk about it a lot here, Don, and where a lot of financial waste that they're not solving the problems.
Well,
Like
it's
tolling is not going to
well,
solve any
yes,
problems.
it's human nature. It's easier to spend somebody else's money. That's just, anybody who's got kids knows how that rolls, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and that's what government does. That's absolutely what this is the reason why, gosh, what was for Abraham Lincoln saying, anything that people can do for themselves, they should do for themselves. And this is why small government is imperative. And we've got to shrink it. That's with our whoever's elected next, and we think we know who we'd like to see. That person's got to be about reducing the size of government at every level. Not just at the presidential level, but at the local level as well. And we really need to focus on that because truly, we have the most control there.
Definitely. Definitely we do. And that's why it's so important to pay attention to what's coming down, in the next election cycle. There's going to be, a lot, and in ways that we can be involved, be it running for office or being on committees or, volunteering to learn more about the different things like school boards and whatnot. It's paying attention to all of this in our communities.
And one thing too, I wanted to mention as well. And I saw this one in the publication called The Defender, talking about the New York Times, and they're now beginning to publish articles saying that the lockdowns were bad for kids. Shocking! No, they were. So what
We've been
conservatism is,
saying that forever on Captive Audience.
boy, for the last 2 years, we've been saying that
Yeah.
in other conservative outlets as well. It's insane to do this. And now what do we see? We see suicides through the roof. We see depression through the roof.
Yeah.
We see a tanking of academic achievement. That this article in the New York Times is basically saying this is a generational disaster that it will take to recover from this. But one thing you never see from the New York Times is an apology. Because you recall, they and many of these other big liberal papers and news outlets were calling us names and calling us stupid and calling us all, Trumpers and all kinds of crazy names just because you disagreed with them and their silly vaxes and masks and all that other stuff. And now they've quietly come around, no apologies, by the way, to admitting that it was a disaster, just like we told them that it would be. My only question is, when are they going to start saying the same thing about the vax itself? But
Well, they're starting to. They're starting to. I don't have the article here, but I saw a headline today that the first hospital in the United States that had the vaccine mandate has now lifted all vaccine mandates in America. And then over in Australia, they have stopped all vaccine mandates. And our military is saying, please come back. They're having such a recruitment problem in our military. They've sent letters out. They're not going to compensate. They're not going to take you back and compensate those that got kicked out because of not having a shot, but they're not going to make you have one, from what I've read. And so, the tide is turning, Don.
Mhm.
It's slow to turn, but it is turning, and
Yeah.
I'm glad for that. Things that we've believed that you have the right to. This is truly your body, your choice when it comes to vaccines.
Well,
And
never
informed
was.
consent.
Mhm. Yeah, never was there a more important topic. Never was there a bigger assault on freedom than what they just did with that. To put your job at risk, literally put your life at risk, to force you to take something that could harm you, that wasn't tested, and then even take away your right to sue for compensation on top of that. It's just the most appalling thing I've ever seen in my life. And it's so great to see people gradually waking up to this.
Well, they are, and it's a pushback on. Well, it's just awakening. You have more and more people that are in from different professions, be it doctors or lawyers or varying professions that are waking up to this fact of, what, there's this was not the right thing to do, and that's the good news. The
Mhm,
tide is turning.
mhm.
We just
Well,
need a little more of that.
Well, one of the toughest things to do is apologize when you're wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe even tougher than that is admitting that you were wrong. It's just hard for human beings to do, um, and few will do it. Um,
You're right. You're
but
right.
we welcome the ones that do.
Well, hey, that's a good segue, if you don't mind, going into detransitioning.
Mm,
So I've got an article here that I ran across from the Daily Caller, and this gal, Morgan Keller, was giving testimony before the Ohio Senate yesterday. And she is a detransitioner, and this is not a child. Young, yes, but not a child. And I watched this morning, of this video actually, but in there is a video of her, but it also talks about this. And this is a very important topic because we're getting a lot of push to transition children. Well,
mm,
she's 26 years old and for 5 years identified as a trans. And she's 26. So it was at 21, she was having some psychological issues. She was not real comfortable with herself as a woman. And in listening to her speak, she went to a psychologist, right?
mhm,
And they said, oh, well, you've must be transgender. Well, learning, actually, it took 6 months before they put her on hormone therapy. But at
Mhm.
22, she had a double mastectomy. And she says, now, of course, in hindsight, she says, I didn't know that I would want children at 22 and that
Mhm.
I was going to be okay to be a
Mhm.
woman.
Mhm.
And so this is very, I commend her for speaking out and telling of her personal experience, how painful that is. I can't imagine. But
You know.
so this is part of an interview that the Daily Caller has done
Mhm.
for of several former transgender individuals for a recent documentary called "Damaged: The
Mhm.
Transing of American Kids." And so she was saying, she says, "I was an adult
Mhm.
and I did this. What about children that they don't have even the capacity that she had?"
Mhm.
And our brains mature, it's like at about 25 years old,
Mhm.
you have
Mhm.
maybe fully matured to be able to make some decisions
Mhm.
and and understand where you are. And she said in the video, she said, what should have happened when I went to therapy is they should have said, well, they should have asked her, well, how come you are uncomfortable as a
Mhm.
woman?
Mhm.
Instead, and helped her to be comfortable. She said, they should have just helped me be comfortable with who I
Yeah.
am
Yeah.
because that's who I want to be. But I hadn't quite figured it out yet. And for me, I can't fathom that. But yet, there's a lot of young people that are very confused these days. And they're having pressures that you and I
Well,
didn't have.
yeah, well, I tell you, it's a multi-faceted problem, obviously, but I think one key component to this is this is the first generation that's been completely uh, unhinged from morality. This is the first group of doctors that have grown up in a generation where they completely become unhinged from morality. And you see that it's completely unethical. They took a Hippocratic oath, which I don't think they take anymore, by the way. They used to take the Hippocratic oath, do no harm. So we're talking about,
Really?
yes,
I know that they did. I don't know that
or
they
or
don't.
they've modified the language of it. So it doesn't say what it used to say. So I'm sure someone out in the audience can look this up, because I'm sure I've seen that. In any event, clearly, if you're doing something like chopping people up, doing a procedure that has not been proven, has not been studied, there's no way you can have long-term data on that because it just started doing it about 15 minutes ago. This is clearly unethical. I remember a case when I lived in San Diego back in, I think it was the late 80s, early 90s. You may have been familiar with this case. Some guy had a disorder, and there's a psychological disorder for this, where the guy wanted to wants to chop his leg off. Right? I just can't live with this leg. I had chopped my leg off. Nobody would touch that. And the guy wound up going to Mexico, and there was a surgeon who'd been ousted from the U.S. for being, immoral and unethical, and had his license revoked. And he went to Mexico, and some guy chopped his leg off, and that was like a big article in the news. Of course, it was done wrong. The guy ended up dying. Blah blah. Well, this is like no different. There are things that you should not be able to do or get. Um, you
Yeah.
couldn't hire somebody to kill you. That's against it's your body, but you can't hire somebody to kill you legally. You shouldn't be able to hire
No.
somebody to destroy yourself like this, no matter how old you are, because it's immoral.
Well, it is. And so I'm going to just read this little bit because it really this just draws the truth that children are incapable of making this decision. And she says, I'm 26 years old and was trans identified for 5 years. In March of this year, after trying to ignore the doubt and regret that began to build around my transition, I woke up one morning with the realization that my trans identity was never about becoming my most genuine self or living my life authentically. Instead, it was a desperate last ditch attempt to become someone else, to escape my unidentified trauma and body and mental issues. End quote.
Mhm.
And that is what this is about. And I applaud the parents that are getting their children the help that they truly need. And and I applaud her for the courage to
Mhm.
speak out and share her story in hopes of helping other people.
Sure.
And she's trying to make a difference in Ohio,
Mhm.
and it was a therapist that recommended a double mastectomy. You don't need to have these types of um, hey, you've got cancer, that's one thing, but to just decide to do that,
Mhm.
or if you are, there's Bruce Jenner.
Mhm.
Apparently, he's that's what he wanted to do, but he wasn't chopping
Mhm.
off, he was adding to.
Mhm.
I don't know that he's ever had lower surgery.
Mhm.
I have no
Yeah,
idea.
I don't either. But
But I do believe that it is
mhm.
a person has the right to that choice,
Mhm.
but not a child.
And let's not forget.
Do I agree with it? No. But I'm gonna just say you are an adult, you have the right, you have to your walk with God is your walk with God,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
It's not mine.
Mhm. Well, I would add this as a layer to it. The Let's not forget the huge profit incentive behind this as well. Because once you start doing those things, you never get off the drugs, you never get off the procedures. And there have been at least one case where it was caught on video. I think it was at one of the hospitals in Baltimore. It might have been John. I shouldn't say it without having that in front of us. I won't say the name of the hospital. But bottom line, they were overheard in a meeting talking about the profitability of doing these procedures and how great it is because they're going to I almost said make a killing. They're going to make a lot of money on this. And
Yeah.
so that's a huge incentive behind it
Forever.
too.
For this person's life,
Yep.
whoever's doing that forever.
Forever. Exactly. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah, and Bobby brings a good point. These kids don't realize that even transgendering, there's still two sexes.
Mhm. Right. Yeah.
It's there is two.
Right.
There are two. That's it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. You can't escape whatever problems you have in
no,
your life. That's not going to fix them. Um,
yeah, and so just bless her to that she is getting the help that she needs,
mhm.
and very, very courageous,
Sure.
Morgan Keller.
Yeah. And
You're courageous.
mhm. Absolutely. Then one other thing I just had to bring up. It seems to be a turning point in the national media with regard to the Ukraine. I'm not sure if you picked up on this. So suddenly there's a whole lot less enthusiasm for supporting the regime in the Ukraine. And we talked about this way back. It's a losing cause. There is no way that Russia is going to allow the Ukraine to become in NATO. That'd be similar to Russia coming along and saying, Mexico's going to be part of their defense network. It's never going to happen. Just like look what we did to keep Cuba from going that route. They're simply doing the same thing there. It doesn't matter whether we think Putin's a good guy or a bad guy, whether we think the Ukraine guy is a good guy or a bad guy. There's enough good and bad to go around. That at the end of the day, that will not happen. That's one thing's for sure. Russia's our nuclear peer. It's our only nuclear peer. I mean, China's a distant second. Second, Russia's a nuclear peer. Now, that might be an economic distant to us, and they are. Their population distant to us now, second as well. But in terms of nuclear capability, we're not putting troops. The American people are not going to support that. And that's the only way you're going to defeat Russia. And you're not going to defeat them then because it becomes nuclear. So looks like they're finally figuring this out. How much money are we going to pour into that place just to kill more Ukrainians? And by the way, now we talked about this a little bit earlier. They've killed off so many military aged, male conscripts that now they're starting to conscript women and men and people over 50. Now that's the last cries of desperation. That's precisely what Stalin and Hitler did in the Ottoman Empire in World War One when they started losing badly. The last thing you do, anybody who's got a heartbeat is going to the front line.
Right.
That's what's
Right.
happening over there.
Yes, it is, and it's so sad. It's so sad. I just feel for the people of Ukraine. for the destruction of their nation at what cost? For
Well,
I just
so
and I'll tell you, Don, when we were watching the buildup, lines of trucks and lines of tanks
mhm,
for weeks, and I thought, why aren't they stopping this? Why
sure,
aren't they stopping this? And had Trump been president,
mhm.
that would have never happened.
No, it would never happen.
And it's just, to me, it's a crime of humanity
Mhm.
that this has happened. And unfortunately, our country, I believe, has perpetuated this.
Oh, no question about it. We
Sadly,
Yeah, we were stupid enough to tell Ukraine that they had a shot at joining NATO after the Russians told us for the last 20 years they're not going to NATO.
right.
They drew the line in the sand, they meant it. Just like John Kennedy drew the line in the sand with Cuba. You're not putting missiles in Cuba. Well, guess what? Ukraine's not going to NATO. Ain't going to happen. And
Yeah.
the people who
Yeah.
paid the price for that, mostly Ukrainians. Because once again, and the people who benefited from it, let's face it, the military industrial complex that's producing all these weapons, killing all these people, and certain people in our administration, I'm sure remain nameless,
And, it,
are,
and
yeah.
and I think that there's been quite a few articles about corruption there, or there's bio labs in Ukraine. Why have we spent so much money? I think, I've, like Lori's saying, due to yacht buying. There's a story out that a couple of, Ukrainian so-called leaders, have bought some yachts. I don't know if the truth, I've, seen a headline on it. I don't know anything else other than that, if it's true or not. But it's just sad. This is wrong leadership is
Mhm.
what causes this kind of thing.
Sure,
And
no
having
question.
weak
Right.
leadership in our nation is
Mhm.
what upsets the rest of the world, truthfully, because we have been a peacekeeper,
Yeah.
although we've been in plenty of conflict, and I feel that maybe even started some of it.
Well, on balance,
Created it.
the rise of Pax Americana has been good for the world, I think, on balance. But that doesn't mean there's been some, let's say, turns down some bad roads. And we're on one of those right now. I mean, clearly, we're on one of those right now. We're pouring money to defend the border of another country, while our own border is like just porous as you can get, and all kinds of things are coming across our own border to destroy this country. How about we redirect those dollars to the southern border here? How quickly could we fix that? Pretty much. The thing that's frustrating about this is that southern border problem is so easy to fix.
Oh, it is. And in fact, Don, I saw a headline today. I don't know anything more. It was just a headline. Can't even tell you where. That and if it was true, even that they were closing all the border crossings in Texas to go after where they're entering illegally. You know,
Okay.
let's pray that they do that. Quite
Right.
frankly, you
Right.
know
Yes.
what? Because what is happening, I'll tell you, it's just a dang crime on
Mhm.
our nation. And
And, and I'm not sure what the rationale with regard to the laws around why states can't just do it themselves. Send the National Guard and just handle it. Now, I'm very uneducated on the. I'm sure there's reasons why, but if you're Texas, if you're Arizona, we know why California won't. But at least if you're Texas and Arizona, New Mexico, you could stop that, or at least put a
yeah,
dent in it. If the
yeah.
federal government won't do its job, then you have to do it for them.
But you look at Texas, they put up razor wire all over the place. And then they had the Border Patrol cutting the razor wire in
Mhm,
areas where the illegals were, and I will call them illegals because if you are not entering this country lawfully,
mhm,
you have entered it illegally.
mhm.
And so illegal immigrants. I'm not a PC person that way.
Yeah.
And so they were having the apparently the feds ordered them to the border patrol agents. I know that they didn't want to. I'm sure they didn't want to do that, but they were cutting the razor wire and letting the people in. And then the Arizona people would go back, and whoever that was going back and putting it all back together. And it just has to be, yeah, the National Guard also cut, the wire. But
Huh. I mean,
it's a mess. Our border is a mess, not just in the south, but to the north as
mhm,
well.
yeah.
And now we've gotten military age Chinese coming across the border in
Yeah.
both ends,
Well,
and that's not
this
good.
this
Keep
will
your head on a swivel, folks, and stay frosty.
this will end one way or the other. The whole thing is it will end just like Stalin and Hitler ended eventually. The whole question is at what cost along the way, right? Uh,
Absolutely, absolutely.
it will
Yeah.
end. Truth always gets out eventually. Just at what cost?
It does. It's coming out in many forms from these past few years,
Yeah.
and there's more
Mhm.
coming.
Yeah.
So we cover a lot of things, but we have to keep faith that we're going to come out ahead and on top of all of this in the end. And truthfully, we have to help Trump get back in the White House.
Sure, absolutely. And every generation has been called to fight for its freedom. One way, it may not be the enemy takes a different form. You take a look at our ancestors. There was a Great Depression. That was a war of a different kind. There was World War One. There was a Civil War. There was American Revolution. Lots of things have come and gone. There was the stresses of the civil rights movement, and now we have an attack by Marxists within our own country. It's not the same as the previous battles, but it's just as intense. And right now, it's not with guns and bullets, and hopefully, it won't come to that. But I think to the degree that we do what we're doing now, we can avoid it coming to that. It's the war of hearts and minds first, and if we can win that, then we can win without bullets flying. Right?
That's true. So I see Lori Good has posted from UCLA Med School that they recite some variation of the oath,
That's it. I know I've seen that.
like some variation.
This allows them to do a lot of things they used to not be able to do. Abortion being one of them, by the way. That used to be that's something that
True.
because of the oath you couldn't do. And they keep modifying these things to allow them to do things that are clearly unethical.
Yeah. Don, thank you for a great night. Thank you, everybody, our audience and our participants here tonight. We really appreciate you, and share the message.
Thanks a lot. Same here. You guys are wonderful. Thank you for coming on and listening to us, and we'll see you next week.
Okay. See you next week. Good
Good
night.
night.